All right. Welcome back from the coffee break. We hope that you had some inspiring and invigorating discussions, and we have just decided that we would resume the session now. It is my pleasure to welcome you back. As I said, I work for WHO Regional Office for Europe. It is my honor also to be here and to co-chair this session together with my colleague, whom I will ask to introduce himself, because I tried to practice pronounce his surname, but it was rather funny than anything else. So over to you.
Здравствуйте всем участникам, я приветствую. Меня зовут Эдуард Кабасакалян, и я представляю Армению, лабораторную сеть, туберкулезную лабораторную сеть Армении. Очень приятно видеть вас всех здесь.
Right. So, seeing what we got ahead of us, a very rich and dense session, we would get right into it. And so let us start with the video from Tajikistan. And just before we start, though, a few words that we need to make, or we're asked to make. Obviously, when we think or talk, and more importantly, act about people-centered care and making care more people-centered, we need not to forget what is one of the key elements that contribute to it, which is diagnosing patients, obviously, diagnosing them fast and accurately, and in a way that is people-centered. So obviously this is important, and we still have also challenges with detection in our region. So without further ado, now to the video.
این فرزندانی من خوشتومنم با بیماری سیل گرفتار بود. اون کس از دنیا گذشتن. ما یک جای در یک خانه میشتیم و همراه اون کس خوراک میخوردیم. در یک خانه ما یک جای زندگی میکردیم. من درباره توبرکولوز میدونستم و لیکن همینش نمیدونستم که بیماری سیل به کودکان تاثیر کند. من فکر میکردم که فقط برای همین کلانا با کسل در تنه همون خودشو اینا به تاثیر نمیرسوند. وقتی که من فهمیدم که پسرانی من با همین کسلی سیل دچار شدن، به مداری داشتن، به قوتی داشتن، اشتها نداشتن، عرق میکردن، بعد سلفه پیدا شد اینا با. از همین سبب من فهمیدم که با بیماری سیل دچار شدن. خیر در اون وقت خوشتمانم نه وفات کردگی بود. وای نداشتیم، امکانیت نبود که همین کودکای برده رنگین کنیم. برای که ما دکتران بدون مرز رنگین روی کرده بودند. مبلغ نیافتیم که اینها برده رنگین کنیم. کمتر به هم خیلی شرایط ما گرفتار شده بودیم. خیلی دور است، خیلی از ما دور است و یا شهر با ما قشلق با میشنیم، ما دیه با میشنیم. دکترخانه که ما رفته همین انالیزوی سپاریدیم و از وای گذشتیم، خیلی از ما دور است. مشکل است اونجا برفتن. ما تو هم دکترخانه خودمون پیاده میریم. اونجا ماشین ها نمیرن. چقدرش بسیاره ماشین برآمده نمیتوند اونجا با ما پیاده میریم. دشواری ها بسیار بودند. درباره همین خوراک و پوشاکشون کمتر ما با وزنین تر هسته. خیر با هستن آدمایی که خیاری میرسونن ما با کمکی مادی میرسونن. همین قطعی زندگی کرده گشتیم.
туберкулез у детей диагностировать очень сложно. Во-первых, это дальность расстояния от местонахождения детей до города, где будет проводиться исследование. Во-вторых, мокроту у детей очень трудно доставать, так как маленькие, особенно дети, они не выделяют мокроту, и необходимо использовать индукцию мокроты или аспирация желудочного содержимого. И в-третьих, врачи общей лечебной сети не знают о симптомах туберкулеза у детей. Но для того, чтобы поставить диагноз туберкулеза у ребенка, необходимо провести многие методы, начать анамнез у этих детей, анамнез эпидемиологически подтверждает, что у детей туберкулез. А также клиническое обследование их показало, что есть туберкулезный процесс. И проведение компьютерной томографии также подтвердило, что есть туберкулез внутригрудных лимфатических узлов. Также кожная туберкулиновая проба. Мы взяли мокроту у детей методом индукции. Была проведена микроскопия, хотя она дала отрицательный результат. Диагноз туберкулеза был подтвержден у детей. И так как бабушка болела XDR-формой туберкулеза, эти дети были из контакта с бабушкой, начали лечение как XDR-туберкулез.
лечениҳояшон нақс мегузарад. ҳамин духтурони мо ҳамоне ки дар амбулатория ҳастанд худашон меоянд, хонаи мо меоянду инҳоро назорат мекунанд, дорухӯрияшона ҳамаша ва ё ба назар гирифтагианд омада мераванд. ҳар рӯз ду маротиба ба хонаи мо омада мераванд. ман ба ҳозираш ба ҳечи, ҳамин фақат дастгири якдигар, зану шавҳар ҳардуямон фарзандонамона дастгирӣ мекунем, ҳардуямон мубориза мебарем барои ҳамин касале ки тезтар аз бадани ҳамиён ҷудо шаваду ҳар чизе ки бошад мо барои ҳамин фарзандамон анҷом медиҳем.
Thank you very much. Obviously a very striking account of the complexity of diagnosis with regards to, on the example of children, and also here the people-centered aspect. I'm happy to introduce, and we already had a nice discussion getting ready for the session, Kathleen England, the TB Diagnostics Advisor from Access Campaign, and looking forward to your presentation.
Thank you. I was asked today, good morning everyone, I was asked today to talk about the diagnostic pipeline, and the pipeline is getting richer, so it's going to be in 15 minutes I can't talk about everything, so, and I was also to provide some updates. So I'd like to start with, generally we know what currently exists for WHO-endorsed diagnostics. We use them every day, genotypic, phenotypic, so let's look at where we are today, what's available at this time. These are some of the currently endorsed WHO products. I have these two slides. The next two slides are from FIND. And these are the diagnostics that are in the pipeline with FIND and WHO. And the first slide is on diversified sputum-based testing. So these are sputum-based tests for drug resistance. And the ones that are in green are the ones that FIND has marked to move forward. And we'll be going through evaluations, and I will talk a little bit about some of these. The next slide is based on non-sputum-based tests for diagnosis and triage. And you'll see that there are several that are marked in red here, and some of these have already moved forward, and some are pending and are in development. The ones that I want to focus on, I think I can, over here, the incipient, I know everybody's interested in latent and incipient TB, but these diagnostics are still in development. These are biomarker signature tests, and we don't see them coming out until 2025, possibly. So this is a more challenging area of work. There's a lot of research in this area and a lot of development, but it's getting it forward and finding the right signatures to identify these different disease syndromes. Currently, this next coming year, in 2018 and 2019, molecular technologies for TB and drug resistance that will be under evaluation by WHO are listed here. The fluorotype from Hein, M2000 real-time TB from Abbott, and BD Max from Becton Dickinson. The gene expert Omni is also in feasibility trials. Radiology with CAD4-TB is also being evaluated, and I wanted to make a comment here that there are many tests that are on the market, that are in use in other countries that have not been submitted to WHO. Like, for example, some tests in China, and even we'll hear about one of the tests here from Russia that is being developed or being used, and these tests have not been submitted for WHO evaluation. And it's important to recognize that not everything out there is being moved forward. So it would be encouraging to get companies to push these diagnostics through for availability for the world. Okay. I was asked to give some updates on the Ultra assay. So as we know, the Ultra has been endorsed by WHO, and it has concession pricing. It is available, but is available in limited quantities right now due to procurement limitations, or due to the scale of production right now, and the fact that the shelf life of the cartridge is about 12 months. We've seen the publications and the evaluations on the sensitivity. We know that it has increased overall sensitivity about 5%. And there's some reduced specificity when we increase sensitivity. The issue, or the most important factors are that for smear negative and HIV positive, the sensitivity has increased significantly for this test. For smear negative, it's 17% increase, and HIV positive patients, it's increased 12%. So this means that the test will be more sensitive. But again, when we get sensitive, we lose some specificity. Detection of resistant has not changed, so it is the same in the new cartridge. The difference in the cartridge is some of the science, and I don't want to go into the science, but some of the science makes it more accurate and allows it to be more sensitive. One of the readouts that we get that's new with the cartridge, every time you get a report from the instrument, it says MTB positive, and then it will say high, medium, low, or very low. And that relates to the number of genomic units that are identified, which relates to the number of bacteria in the specimen. There's another marker in the Ultra that's called trace. And this trace quantification basically says we found TB bacteria, and with a detection below 100 CFUs per mil and a limited detection of 20 CFUs per mil, 20 bacteria. And with a trace detection, you have to think about the patient that you're looking at, okay? In the recommendations, it says if it's a patient who's never been treated and you have a trace call, then it's TB positive. If the patient had been treated, there's a chance, even in the past 2 years, 2 years ago they were treated, that there's still TB bacteria that are dead. And this is a molecular test, so it will pick that up. So then if it's positive, what they suggest for retreatment cases is that you do another test. Maybe you have a bad specimen, a sputum specimen that's not quality, or you go ahead and go through culture and DST for that patient. Now the trace call, we don't know how many of those we will see in the future until we implement the tool. Once we see how many of those, we will have probably more recommendations on how to move forward with the approach for each patient. For extrapulmonary TB, there's only one study out right now for CSF that was done in Uganda, and it increased the sensitivity significantly to 95%. There are more studies going on right now with extrapulmonary TB and Ultra that WHO is conducting, and then those results will be out hopefully by the end of this year. The Extend XDR cartridge. So recently there was a publication of a prototype cartridge that was released this year, and it was discussed at the union meeting in Guadalajara. And is being evaluated this year further by WHO and hope to be released in 2019 at some time. Again, the science has changed, so it covers more mutations. It covers the mutations at the bottom. It covers resistance to fluoroquinolines, and resistance to the second-line injectables, and resistance to INH in the one cartridge. So this cartridge then we have would be used as a follow-on cartridge to the MDR, or the MTB RIF-resistant cartridge, MTB RIF assay, for patients who are RIF-resistant. And then the treatment decision will be made to go to the shorter regimen or a specialized regimen according to the results you obtain. The sensitivity and specificity is listed up here in the table, and one is related to the gold standard of liquid culture, midget, and the other is related to sequencing. And typically we compare a molecular test to sequencing for the reference standard. But everybody knows midget, and they want to know what the correlation is to the phenotypic assay, so it's here. And these actually correlate pretty much to, similar to what the LPA sensitivities are. Omni. Everybody wants to know about the Omni device. So the Omni has been delayed again. It was supposed to be out in Q2, but now it's probably going to be out at the end of the year, maybe. They did some feasibility studies, and they've had some challenges, so they have to go back to the drawing board for a few things. The price has now been increased. So this was something I sent out a flyer to all the MSF operations. The price has gone up almost 80%, which we're not very happy with. The other issue is that the system will need connectivity in order to monitor the performance of the modules and to provide the new service model that they hope to provide for maintenance and service and troubleshooting and module swapping. Data will be transmitted into a cloud, and that means patient data will go, but it will be encrypted. So people who put these in remote access areas where the internet does not exist or there's no connectivity will have to periodically move them into a zone where there's connectivity to get the updates, to get the software updates, to get the assay updates. Not very convenient, right? So we've as the global experts and the stakeholders have gone to Cepheid and told them this is not feasible for the places we want to put that. So we've had discussions with them recently. There is a specific cartridge for the Omni. It doesn't have to do with any of the science or the sensitivity or the specificity, but it has to do with the communication. It communicates from a cell phone mobile device. So it needs an NFC chip for that communication. So the charge includes the NFC chip plus this new support model that they have, that they're designing for maintenance. This means that you will have if you're using the gene experts that we already have in country, there will be a cartridge for that. And if you have Omni, it'll be a different procurement cartridge for the Omni device. Now the Omni cartridges can go into the normal instruments, but you're still going to pay that $1.50 extra, or that $1.50 charge. So then it increases the price. So those are some things that we're discussing with Cepheid to change. There's some charges for added costs. You can probably get a solar panel if you want, but that's an extra charge. And again, we are looking at, there's no data published yet on factors like dust, which we've seen have been an issue, durability, ruggedness, temperature, humidity, none of that has been reported yet. So I think they've had some challenges with their first trial, so they're going to have to improve it, and that's where it stands right now. TB-LAM. So we all know that the Alair TB-LAM test is out there. It's been recommended since 2015, and it's used for a specific niche of patients that are HIV positive and that have CD4 counts, is recommended for CD4 counts less than 100. There's some current evidence by MSF in the research that they've done that we can use this for patients who are HIV positive with CD4 counts less than 200, expanding the range of use. And those publications are out there, right, Helena? But the good thing and the good news is there are 3 new tests coming out that will be better, will be more sensitive. And the one that I'm going to focus on is the one that's going through the FIND. There's one from Biopromics, there's one from Omega Diagnostics, there's some nanotechnologies that are in research. And the Fujifilm is the one that FIND is developing and trying to move forward. This one will detect LAM in urine, blood, or sputum. It uses monoclonal antibodies instead of polyclonal antibodies, so it's more specific and more sensitive. And it can be used for anyone. Right now, they're hoping it can be used for anyone. The studies that have been conducted right now, presently, have been in the HIV population, and they've showed, regardless of the CD4 count, the sensitivity has increased 40%. So this is a significant change. And the specificity is 97%. If, right now they're going on and doing studies in HIV-negative patients and children. So these are being done. If this test proves to be as good, it will be a rapid diagnostic point-of-care test. And the other ones are on the way behind it, so there will be competitors. So we will see what happens in the future for these. I talked about new diagnostics for drug-resistant TB. There are many platforms that WHO are evaluating. As I said, the HINE and the Abbott and the BD Max systems are the first 3 systems up here. And they are centralized tests that do high throughput and high volume testing. In order to end TB, we need to run mass testing and get more diagnosis. And these tests all do INH and RIF resistance right now that are being evaluated. They are hopefully going to expand to fluoroquinolone and second-line injectables in the future. But right now they're doing TB and INH and RIF resistance. The key is that they're high volume and that they're multi-disease. Some of these are already being used in countries that have HIV and HIV viral load. So tests are out there for that. There are also Hep C viral load. There are also many other tests. If you go to the websites, you will see there's a whole line of tests that can be done by some of these technologies. So you can have a multi-disease platform in your central lab that will test anything. Or not anything, but a lot of the necessary, needed pathogens that we're interested in public health. The last is the TrueLab, TrueNat. And this is an Indian product, and this is the competitor to Cepheid right now. It's in the evaluation and fine testing, and at 120 microscopy centers, and it's battery operated. It has a DNA extraction step, and then it has a chip-based technology that does TB and then a follow-on RIF resistant. And this is for district level or below district level testing, and it's actually performing well. So I haven't seen the new data on it, and that's supposed to come out this year, soon. Sequencing, everybody says, whoa, sequencing. Sequencing is actually moving forward really fast, and it's moving forward through the FIND and WHO process. I will show you the timeline on that next, but there are several steps in blue that are outlined of what happens through the process. And FIND is evaluating these processes. Oops, wrong one. FIND is evaluating the processes in the first 4, the DNA, where it says DNA at the top, there's mobile, Genelution, Diasorin, HINE. These are DNA extraction tools. So doing a head-to-head evaluation of the DNA extraction tools that are out there. They've already looked at many of the options, and these are the 4 that they decided to evaluate. Then there's the sequencing platforms. There's the Oxford Nanopore, which is the MinION at the top in the picture. It's a very portable device, and it can do multiplexing. And it's out in the field kind of activity. There's the Illumina MiniSeq and the iSeq 100, which are smaller benchtop units. And the MiniSeq is about $50,000 and can do 50 tests, 50 isolates at a time, or 50 sputum or samples at a time, DNA extracted samples. Excuse me. And the other one, the iSeq 100, is a smaller unit, smaller than GeneXpert. It could do one at a time in a smaller lab. So their technologies are getting smaller, and the software, the next set of written text there is the different types of software that analyze it. So these are all also being under evaluation by FIND. And then there's a project called the Cryptic Project. And the Cryptic Project is developing a prediction tool. It's taking 12,000 isolates from all over the world, sequencing them, finding the MICs, and these are all MDR, XDR, pre-XDR known from patients. So we have the disease, we have the outcome as we're seeing it, and they have the DSTs, okay, the liquid culture midget DSTs. All of this data is being put in a big database, and this data will be used to predict resistance. So we get a mutation, and we look at the MIC and the midget result, and we look at everything, this algorithm they have, and it will come out and say, look at high confidence of resistance, moderate confidence, minimal confidence, no resistance, or indeterminate. So there's no data on it. So that what will happen is we will be able to say, this drug you cannot use because there's too much evidence to support the resistance. So it's how we're trying to deal with the unknowns. The positive thing about sequencing is that it can cover a whole genome, and within like 50 to 60 US dollars, you can have all the mutations that are related, all covered. You can do genotyping. You can see if it's an NTM. You can get information on and use it for surveillance. You can use it for transmission studies. So having this technology in country will be beneficial to many countries who have a high level of drug resistance. This is the pipeline for FIND, and it's looking at their strategy. So in 2017, they did the DNA extraction evaluation. In 2018, they're looking at the platforms. They expect to have it endorsed by 2019 and allow for implementation toward the end of 2019. So it's really moving fast. There's also been a guide published in the United States by the American Public Health Laboratories on how to implement sequencing. So this guide the WHO will probably use to develop one for a global perspective. And this came out in 2016, so the US is putting it in their public health laboratories already. And that's the update as far as I can go. There's a lot more in the pipeline. And if you want to talk to me afterwards or have questions, I think we have a little discussion section that we have a panel discussion. I'm happy to answer what I can. Thank you.
I'm happy to present the next speaker, which is a head of reference laboratory of TB in Georgia, Osundan. Good morning, dear colleagues. I would like to present here our experience of research of cartridge. Okay. The objectives of our study was to estimate the detection accuracy of expert MTB and RIF Ultra for TB and a different geographically diverse population. The study results have been presented March last year at the World Health Organization meeting in Geneva. So in November, these results were published. As I would like to mention that, as you are aware, development of Gene Expert as diagnostic was a very important step forward for identification and further treatment of mycobacteria of TB and RIF rifampicin resistance. But I need to note that this system does have a certain limitation, in particular in perfect specificity and imperfect sensitivity in case of low bacterial load, and imperfect specificity for RF resistance in case of low mycobacterial concentration, imperfect detection resistance, specificity for RF resistance due to silent mutation, and in case of non-tuberculosis mycobacteria, imperfect sensitivity in this case. So, an improved cartridge was made. It was called RIF Ultra, On the slide, you actually see the technical specifications of this cartridge. The most comfortable thing about that was that the cartridge is used for on the same platform, and this cartridge can at the same time reveal both Mycobacteria of TB and resistance as well. The cartridge does have a quite big chamber. It's 50 microliter for replication of DNA, so it does allow to find in specimens with a very little bacillum, Mycobacteria of TB, to find it. So the time of reveal, the time has improved for both positive and negative detection results. So there is a list of sponsors and organizations. Actually, the slide that have been skipped. Yeah, this one. So the main organization to support was FIND. They have we signed a memorandum of understanding with them, and we were working with them based on this MOU. So 10 reference laboratories have participated in 8 countries: Brazil, Uganda, South Africa, China, Belarus, India, and Georgia. So I would like to briefly talk about the design of the study. So this was a multi-central prospective study so it was detection of sensitivity and specificity of ultra expert for TB and rifampicin resistance. So that was the main objective of the study. In the study, the 2 cohorts were used. Those persons with supposed suspected TB and MDR risk groups. So reference standard was the culture test, drug sensitivity for testing for TB medication, and sequencing was a mandatory one. Inclusion criteria for the both groups. The main criteria was age of patients. It showed patients must have been over 18 years old. Informed consent was the must. Presumptive pulmonary TB. Some of the typical signs of TB is like cough over 2 weeks. Readiness to give out 4 sputum samples, and monitoring through over 42 and 70 days after enrollment. MDR risk group criteria. One of the main inclusion criteria was apart from those mentioned was under an analysis of microbiologically confirmed resistance, history of previous TB failure, treatment failure, and drugs consumed over 3 months. Inclusion criteria, apart from, in addition to inclusion criteria, we use exclusion criteria. Previous treatment with any TB drugs 6 months prior to enrollment with a case detection group. Okay, on the slide you see the 4 diagrams. So we made several, so day 1 and day 2 activity. We have collected sputum taxes after certain decontamination and culture. On the third samples we were making ultra gene expert and culture study. The 4th sample would be kept to see the difference. So to like a check sample, if there will be some misreading or results of previous sampling were not understood, we would use the sample 4 for that. So all the samples were kept under minus 80 degrees in the refrigerator, in the freezer. On the slide, you see some clinical and demographic characteristics of our patients. If you look at the Georgia, it looks quite representative in terms of number of patients enrolled. We had over 300 patients enrolled, which were made analysis. So on this slide, you can see some comparative analysis of TB detection. You can see culture positive samples, negative. The culture positive cases, ultra demonstrated specificity of 87.8%, which is 5% higher than specificity of regular expert cartridge. When a microscopy smear sample was negative, so the difference was already seen here, the level of 17%. Ultra and positive specificity cases, it demonstrated 87%, and expert showed 1987%, and expert demonstrated 89 and 75% on HIV minus, HIV plus cases. So there is a difference of some percentage, but this is the finding should be not less than 5% with those patients with the history of treatment of TB. And after, if you look at detection of rifampicin resistance, data look quite similar. So it does not really affect on rifampicin resistance, as you can see from the slide. And I want to share with you some primary results. So with a negative sensitivity of ultra cases, 17% higher than that of expert, and smear negative microbiological confirmed TB cases. Sensitivity of ultra is 5% higher than that of expert in all TB cases. Specificity of ultra is 3% lower than that of expert. In order to avoid no false positive results for rifampicin resistance in case of low concentration of mycobacteria, detection of heteroresistance, and detection of non-tuberculosis mycobacteria. These are primary data, but expert was recommended, as you know, as one of very important diagnostic tests, and using expert ultra for all research is also so. Even though that in presentation it was mentioned that ultra compared with the expert, if you compare, so the expiration time is the 13 month. If you look at, so it could change, because a 9 to 12 month store time was for the gene expert several years ago, in the year 12. Now it's much longer. So if properly manage delivery and supply of the cartridges, then it can switch over to the ultra text, but provided that this cartridge is produced in larger amount. So we hope that by the end of this year already, we will have this opportunity to work on that cartridge. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much, Professor Dan. Very interesting presentation, and the results also very promising and helpful. Just we discussed previously, in view of the timing, we are suggesting that we take questions from the audience after we have heard the series of presentations, and then we will also try and use the opportunity to have a discussion as time allows. So thank you very much for now. And I would like to introduce a colleague from Tajikistan with the presentation on experience on TB diagnosis in children, Dr. Boboshan Sharipov, the Deputy Director, RCTC from Tajikistan. The floor is yours. Very welcome.
Здравствуйте, уважаемые.
Good morning, dear colleagues, dear Presidium. I would like to present to you the experience of diagnostics of TB among children in Tajikistan. As you can see from the WHO report, diagnosis of TB in children is a difficult one, especially among children below 5, as children that are closely in touch, in contact with adults with pulmonary TB. So this slide demonstrates number of children and the ratio of children with active forms of TB compared to the total number of patients with TB. In the year 16, as you see, it was 10.8% compared to the total population or children population. TB amounted to 17 for 100,000. Or over 17. On that slide, you actually see that there is an annual increase, growth, with number of children with MDR TB cases and diagnostics of TB, and they're diagnosed in a lower proportion level than overall TB. What is actual proportion of MDR cases in children? That is still under the question. So this slide shows you the numbers with children with pulmonary TB in our republic. Out of total number of children revealed with active TB form, over 250 cases were those children with pulmonary TB, which is 48%. And so bacteriologically confirmed pulmonary TB was confirmed with those ages that you can see, 5 to 14-year-old. So the numbers you see accordingly. Out of non-pulmonary TB was 321 cases, which was approximately 51%. Currently, how TB is diagnosed in the country? Children with different symptoms usually turn to health facilities, and there is a TB screening taken with children at bacteriological confirmation, diagnostics is taking place in case of signs and symptoms of TB. So it's microscopic bacteriology and X-ray of chest area is conducted. In case of the confirmation of the diagnosis, if bacteriological not confirmed, other testing is done, computer tomography, MAN2 check, and other type of research and examination. So diagnostic in children usually relies on the passive case funding, as we have mentioned. So there are different symptoms, regular coughing that over 2 weeks that cannot be treated as antibacterial treatment. fever, weight loss, and others. So children have strong, in fact, extrapulmonary TB symptoms are more frequent in children. And the history of in the history of the sources that not always can be diagnosed is the presence of index case. X-ray and specific bacteriological skin testing, MAN2, bacteriological confirmation. Some of those are quite expensive, but if possible, we conduct this diagnostic, and also we we find out the HIV status as well. There are some difficulties with bacteriological confirmation in children. As you know, children not always can collect spontaneous sputum because it appears after a certain age of the children, so you can't properly collect it before. So what we usually do, we make the so-called induction of sputum and try and conduct other activities. So what difficulties we face? Sometimes parents are against of certain type of diagnostics. So and because of this and other difficulties, we want to introduce other easy access instruments. And also we want to conduct certain type of TB testing with HIV positive and others. So there are practical experience. MSF with the Ministry of Health and TB Service of the Republic of Tajikistan is working on introduction of new methods of finding of diagnostics and treatment among children to improve the case detection. A procedure of sputum induction was introduced in 2013. For early detection, also contact tracing was introduced in 2016. Results since the moment of introduction of sputum induction, serious complications were not reported. As you can see from the slide, in the year 14, 526 procedures took place. Microscopy revealed 3 smear positive cases, which is only 0.5%. Gene expert confirmed 33 cases with mycobacteria, which amounts to 6.2%. In the year 15, 753 samples were taken. Indicators were similar to the previous year. But after the contact tracing and combined comprehensive methods was introduced, number of procedures rapidly increased. In the year 16 and 17, a number of cases revealed also increased. So in the year 16, microscopy revealed 22 cases, which is 1.6 and 1.8 in the year 17 accordingly. And Genex revealed 114 and 113%, which is 8.4 and 7.5%. So we see general improvement of TB diagnostics. Currently, on that slide, you see the number of patients and family members that checked for contact tracing activities. The result demonstrate that in the year 16, only 28 cases were revealed with active TB form, and for 121 suspected TB cases, 1 active TB case was found. So a total of 6 sensitive cases, 16 MDR TB was found in 17 XDR TB cases. So the total of 46 active TB forms, TB samples were found, TB cases. So in 2016 and 17, among the cases with the revealed resistant TB, number of resistant TB cases were revealed was higher because of this complex approach with the contact tracing. So from the slide you can see that it's demonstrated increase of number of revealed TB cases. Well, if you look at the early diagnostics, the facts demonstrate that active case finding and contact tracing help us to reveal TB cases along with the other methods. So on-time diagnostics of TB diagnosis require active revealing of the so now case finding contact tracing is the regular activity. So like nurse visits current patients like in the morning or in the afternoon. So this is a methodology that is being introduced in Tajikistan for on-time TB diagnostics among children. So, a summary. TB among children is expressed differently and require a high degree of suspicion. So, diagnostics is highly dependent on a proper and timely diagnostics like sputum induction, and this is more efficient than general skin test screening. Techniques allow more suitable materials to be analyzed in children are in great need. Well, thank you for your attention. If you have questions, I'm ready to answer. Okay, I think we will get back to questions in the end of the session. Now, I'm happy to present to you
now it gives me pleasure to introduce Ms. Anna. Good morning, dear colleagues. First of all, thank you, the organizers, for the invitation to participate in this symposium. In my presentation, I would like to tell you about the Russian molecular genetic diagnostics systems in the Russian Federation. In the Russian Federation, we can currently observe a reduction of mortality and morbidity in the area of TB. Over the last 15 years, the morbidity has gone down by 1.5 times and mortality by 2 times. The problem is still the MDR-TB, the drug-resistant tuberculosis. The share of cases with multiple drug resistance is growing every year, and in 2016 it went up to 27%. In this situation, the most important factor is to prescribe treatment on the basis of the data on drug susceptibility, drug sensitivity, and it is the molecular diagnostic method that makes it possible to ensure this objective is met. The Ministry of Health of the Russian Federation and the professional community regulates the algorithms for TB diagnosis and the treatment of TB patients, and the algorithms were implemented back in 2014. A mandatory component of all the algorithms for the diagnosis of the tuberculosis bacteria is the detection of tuberculosis mycobacteria, their differentiation between tuberculosis and non-tuberculosis mycobacteria, and the drug susceptibility testing, both using molecular methods and culture methods. It is noteworthy that the TB activities in the Russian Federation are a priority, and they are funded by the state. On an annual basis, we procure drugs, and subsidies are being allocated for the procurement of diagnostic equipment and diagnostic kits. As a quality guarantee, in 2015, 3 laboratories and research institutions received certificates from these supernatural reference laboratory network of the World Health Organization. Russian molecular and genetic technologies in the TB diagnosis have been in use since 2005. It is in 2005 that the anti-TB service introduced a hydrogel biochip technology which had been developed by the Institute of Molecular Biology named after Engelhard. Since 2008 in TB diagnosis we started to use the multiplex allele-specific RT-PCR method in real time. Its developers are specialists from the Tuberculosis and Pulmonology Research Institute, which is now the National Medical Research Center of Tuberculosis, Pulmonology and Infectious Diseases that I currently represent here, as well as scientists from the scientific and production company Syntol. The technology, the PCR technology in real time, the RT-PCR amplitude technology makes it possible to detect over a few hours tuberculosis mycobacteria from the clinical sample, including DNA. The same applies to non-tuberculosis mycobacteria. And the next reagent sets, the amplitudal URV, makes it possible to detect genetic resistance to a number of drugs such as rivampicin. The same applies to fluoroquinolones. There is a set of reagents that makes it possible to do that. And we also have some reagents that make it possible to differentiate the tuberculosis mycobacteria inside the complex, which is very important for the diagnosis of post-vaccinal complications among children. And we also have sets for epidemiological genotyping. A peculiarity of the amplitude technology is the quantitative analysis. We analyze 2 genes, the IS6110 and the regX3 gene. This improves the accuracy of the analysis, and furthermore it makes it possible to conduct the real quantitative analysis. That means define the number of microbacterial cells in a sample. And the susceptibility and resistance test. For that, we have a new molecular technology which is called the multi-concurrent allele-specific RT-PCR technology. It makes it possible to detect 11 mutations associated with RNP resistance and 6 mutations with INH resistance, as well as 6 mutations with fluoroquinolone resistance. There are 3 stages of this analysis. Stage number 1 is sample preparation and inactivation of the diagnostic sample. Stage number 2 is DNA extraction, and stage number 3 is the actual PCR in real time, RT-PCR, and the analysis of the outcomes. The average time to results is 2 days, but it is noteworthy that this technology requires specialized premises, either a separate molecular and genetic laboratory or allocated rooms and premises in the microbiological laboratory. And there should be at least 2 rooms of that kind for this technology to be applied. The prime cost of the test, in accordance with the publication, is approximately 1,000 rubles. That is roughly 15 to 16 US dollars. Diagnostic characteristics of the sets include the following. MTB detection are high. Specificity is between 99 and 100%, whereas sensitivity is 50 to 100 cells per milliliter, which is identical to the data of the culture-based research using liquid cultures. Specificity and sensitivity for genetic determinants of resistance exceed 90%. For rifampicin, specificity is 99.5% and sensitivity 92%. For isoniazid, consequently, respectively 98 and 93%. And fluoroquinolones, specificity is 90% and sensitivity is at the same level. The next Russian technology, domestic technology that I would like to tell you about today is the biological chip technology, which was introduced in our practice even before the PCR-RT technology. Beginning 2005 and up until 2017, we have developed and introduced the following kits and sets of reagents. The TB Biochip 1 set, which makes it possible to identify genetic determinants of isoniazid and rifampicin resistance. TB Biochip 2 makes it possible to identify genetic determinants of resistance to fluoroquinolones, and the new generation set, where you can use only one biochip to define drug resistance both to first-line drugs such as rifampicin, isoniazid, and the second-line drugs such as fluoroquinolones, injection drugs, and capreomycin. Furthermore, the same kit allows you to conduct epidemiological genetic typing, and it makes it possible for you to study the main genetic families of the tuberculosis mycobacteria. There are two more sets which make it possible to use them in the PCR-RT technology and differentiate TB mycobacteria of the TB complex, which is very important for diagnosing post-vaccinal complications among children and identify bovis BCG bacteria and others. And currently in development and in the course of registration is a set for the studies, which is also very important for our country at the moment. That's for differentiation of non-tuberculosis mycobacteria. The basis of this analysis is laid by the hydrogel biochip technology. The principal difference of this technology from the others is the mobilization of molecular probes of three-dimensional semi-spherical elements affixed to a flat plate. Low-density hydrogel-based biochips have a significant potential in identification of clinically significant mutations and single nucleotide polymorphism in human, viral, and bacterial genomes. So this technology is not only used for TB diagnosis, it is also applied in other bacterial and viral infections, congenital diseases of human beings, and its production is based in our Institute of Molecular Biology. It's certified under ISO 13185. Its productivity is several thousand biochips per day. The basis of the analysis is created by four-stage process. Stage 1 is sample preparation and DNA extraction. Then it's the multiplex PCR with concurrent fluorescent marking, and the hybridization on the biochip stage, with the resulting phase recording and interpretation of results using special equipment called biochip analyzer. Time to results in this case is approximately 3 days. To conduct these studies, you have to have specialized lab premises, you have to have trained personnel, and it is also possible to organize this lab on the basis of an existing bacteriological lab. But for this, you would need to allocate at least 3 separate dedicated rooms. The prime costs of one test, including all materials, reagents, and cost of labor, is approximately 3,000 rubles. This is approximately $53. At this slide, we're showing you an example of a biochip. Different colors show the cells that are responsible for the analysis of genetic determinants of TB drugs, and there are cells which are responsible for the studies of the main genetic families. At this slide, we have an example of result interpretation. On the left-hand side, we're showing the example of a study of a diagnostic sample and the outcomes of the study of tuberculosis mycobacteria with no genetic determinants of resistance to anti-TB drugs. It's been identified that the strain belongs to the European and American line. On the right-hand side, we are showing the example of result interpretation of a study with the help of biochips of a clinical sample and the identified TB mycobacteria, where we discover genetic determinants of resistance to TB drugs, including X or wide drug resistance. XDR, we have that the DNA of mycobacteria belong to the Beijing biotype in the mutation type as shown on the slide. So these are the conclusions that you can arrive at on the basis of the study. The sensibility for TB mycobacteria with the help of biochipping technology compared to microscopic studies makes it possible to have DNA extracted from samples with positive microscopy in 100% of cases and 20% of cases in negative microscopy outcomes. Diagnostic characteristics of this kit and the determination of genetic determinants to rifampicin and other, including injecting drugs, as you can see at this slide, exceeds 90%. For caprimicin, the specificity is 87.9%, but sensitivity is high, 96.8. And for ethambutol, 57% is specificity and 89.9% sensitivity. In principle, these diagnostic characteristics are similar to, well, they're in line with the other systems similarly in use. And as I already told you, the last gen TB test set also makes it possible to conduct epidemiological genotyping and study the main genotypical families. And an analysis took place in the Northwestern Federal District of the Russian Federation, where we identified that the predominant genetic family is the family of Beijing. That's in 70% of cases. We have been able to identify a connection when identifying this family, especially such option as B0W148. So in fact, that means XDR and MDR, the multi-drug resistance, and the XDR, the extra-wide drug resistance. And on the other hand, the Euro-American line identification shows that the TB is drug susceptible. So these are the general trends that we have been able to identify. The users of Russian test systems have published over 150 articles in peer-reviewed Russian and foreign journals on the efficiency of early diagnosis of drug-resistant TB. And this rapid diagnosis of drug resistance makes it possible to increase the treatment efficiency for patients with drug-resistant tuberculosis. At this slide, we are showing the algorithm that has been developed and is being applied in the institution that I represent. That's the National Medical Center of Pulmonology, Tuberculosis, and Infectious Diseases of the Ministry of Health of the Russian Federation. As you can see here on this slide, to diagnose, we study two samples of diagnostic material from the patient. We use three methods: microscopy, molecular, and genetic, and culture-based method using liquid cultures with the use of the Bacterin JIT system. The main factor in selecting the chemotherapy regime is the molecular and genetic method. If rifampicin resistance is identified, the relevant treatment is prescribed for MDR. If we identified MDR resistance to rifampicin and fluorotenolol, then we have to treat XDR. If no genetic determinants have been identified for TB drugs, then we prescribe TB treatment using the drug-susceptible TB drug regime. But later on, using liquid cultures and using the Bacterin JIT automated system, we can correct and adjust the initially identified regimens, taking into account the studies of a broad spectrum of TB drugs from the reserve line, and then it is possible to prescribe individualized chemotherapy regimes. We'd like to note that the TB methods, including the regimens, are based on the diagnosis of resistance, and these were approved by the World Health Organization. Back in 2015, the regional director of the World Health Organization's regional office for Europe, Zsuzsanna Jakab, noted the success of the Ministry of Health of Russia in fighting drug-resistant tuberculosis. The high importance of the problem in the Russian Federation has been reflected in the organization and the conduct in 2017 of the first global ministerial conference of the World Health Organization. Russia has become the country that hosted 1,000 participants from 120 member states of the World Health Organization. The participants of the conference were welcomed by President of our country, Vladimir Putin, who noted the global character of the problem and the need to join our efforts in searching for new and effective methods to fight tuberculosis. At this conference, the Moscow Declaration was developed to eradicate tuberculosis, and at present, our strategy in the Russian Federation and our actions are based, among other things, on this declaration. Thank you for your attention.
Now that we have also heard from youth, very interesting and informative presentation. We are done with the presentation. We are done of the session. So we would like to now open up the session. So we would like to now open up the floor. Participants here present, and if you have now, I'm sure you have plenty of questions actually to the presenters. So who would like to presenters? So who would like to start? Not so many. Please. Not so many. Please also briefly introduce yourself and to whom the question is addressed, please, at the beginning. Thank you.
Yes, so I'm Lorenzo Guglielmetti. I'm working in the NTB trial with MSF France in Paris. So my question is both, you can decide between you, for Kathleen and for Rusudan. So it's so thank you first of all for your nice presentation. It's about the ultra test. So I think we are all very interested by the performance of this test, but there is something which I found a little bit strange in the trial, in the study which has been published in the Lancet Infectious Diseases that you have mentioned. So basically, I think that the difference in sensitivity, which is the most interesting new feature of the ultra, is really driven by performances in smear negative patients. And so in the study in the Lancet, the gene expert has, if I am not wrong, something about 46% sensitivity in smear negative patients, and the ultra has 63. So the difference, of course, is significant, but what is a bit strange is that gene expert, you might remember that the first description in gene expert, it was a New England paper where the sensitivity in smear negative was 70%, and even there is a big meta-analysis by the Cochrane, where the sensitivity of gene expert in smear negative is above 60%, and even I think even the lower bound of the confidence interval is over 50%. So I don't know if you have any explanation why the performance of gene expert in that study was so bad in smear negative patients, and whether there are other studies that can really comfort us that ultra is really adding something, or can we trust a study where the performance was so underrepresented? We compare what has been described before. So thank you very much.
For the Cochrane review, that takes the results are pooled. So they go across a pool of testing, and I think the tests that were provided the results were specific assessment. The values 46% versus 63% were studies. So if you look at the pooled testing available, it's a little different. I think that's the difference there.
I do agree with you. When I presented my presentation, what I mentioned was primary results. So these are the initial results that we got inside the country. As it has already been mentioned here, this effort involved 10 reference laboratories, and some other studies of Gene Expert Ultra were also included. We presented the results that we came up with in our lab. Therefore, this is the data that we have, and it is quite possible that when you talk about the publication in Lancet, that is probably the data that we received. But when the results were pooled, as it has already been mentioned, the results must have been changed at that point. Good afternoon. I have a question to Anna Panova. I'm from MSF, and thank you very much for your presentation. Indeed, I have the following question. The biochipping, as far as I understand, please correct me if I'm wrong, but it is my understanding that you're only using them in your institution. No? They're used across Russia? Thank you for your question. Yes, indeed. The technology, the biochipping technology, is not only used in the scientific and research center such as ours. It's used in the TB institutions. And currently, this quite complicated technology is used by approximately 30 TB institutions across the country.
Can I add to your question? So you have it in, we have the LPA, Hein out there, that's used in many laboratories and TB facilities that have the 3 rooms, that have the developed infrastructure. Does this mean that that technology could be transferred into these already set up settings? Your technology, could it be used in those settings?
Yes, absolutely. As far as the requirements towards the lab and the qualification of experts are concerned, they're approximately the same, these 2 technologies, the LPA and the biochips. But I'd like to note that in our laboratories, we do use the LPA technology as well. Again, approximately 30 labs take advantage of it. So there are labs that use both biochips and LPA, so this combination is also possible.
So we have lots of options. That's a good thing.
There is one question.
Then we go to the left side, please.
Thank you very much.
Sorry. I'd like to thank the organizers and all the speakers for the wonderful symposium. The presentations are very topical, the statements are very interesting, they create a lot of food for thought. Thank you for the up-to-date information. I have a question to Dr. Rasudan. I did not quite understand, how did you perform this identification of non-tuberculosis mycobacteria with the GBRIF experts? This is my question. And then also a very brief statement after that on my behalf, if possible, after you respond. Thank you for your question. We defined the non-TB mycobacteria. Well, we didn't do it separately. How should I put it? The non-TB mycobacteria were detected, and then also TB mycobacteria were identified. So we did not define on the inside which ones were TB mycobacteria, which ones were not. No, first let me introduce myself. Sorry. My name is Olga Demihova. I'm the chief scientist and the advisor to the director of the Central TB Institute of the Russian Academy of Sciences. And I really liked the presentation from Anna Panova, my countrymate. And indeed, these biochips were developed jointly with the institute under the Academy of Sciences in our institute, and this is indeed a very promising stream, and I would like to support you in this. Indeed, this is the stream, this is the area that has a very bright future. Furthermore, I'd like to add a few words about the following. In the Central Tuberculosis Institute, in their microbiology department, which is now one of the 3 centers of excellence in the supranational reference laboratory network in Russia, great attention is being devoted to the differentiation between non-tuberculosis mycobacteria and tuberculosis mycobacteria. We use spectrometry related methods, and the Gordon class non-tuberculosis mycobacteria were sequenced. Indeed, this is a very promising area of research because in Russia, as in a number of other countries, we are now observing the growth of 9 tuberculosis mycobacteriosis cases. And quite frequently, it is very difficult to differentiate between tuberculosis and non-tuberculosis etiology. And of course, this area needs to be further developed and looked at. Furthermore, the immune-suppressed patients with HIV, patients with other infectious diseases, patients with diabetes, patients with other immune-suppressing conditions. For them, the growth of mycobacteriosis cases is very significant, and this is a very important area. Furthermore, in our institute, we are now studying quite successfully, and we have been able to address the issue of automating many microbiological study methods, including our work with Syntol. We've had a joint study with them, and quite naturally this makes it possible to improve the efficiency of microbiological studies and the efficiency and effectiveness of our laboratories, the accuracy of diagnosis, the effectiveness of diagnostic activities. And furthermore, I'm pretty sure you remember about this, but it has not been mentioned yet. So I'd like to mention this now. In 2017, the European Laboratory Initiative that includes, by the way, Doctor of Medicine Sevastianova from our institute, developed an algorithm for diagnosing tuberculosis and monitoring tuberculosis treatment and identifying drug susceptibility among patients. And this was done back in 2017. It was published, the guideline was published in 2017, and to a large degree it was done on the basis of the previous studies. These studies were incorporated into that effort, and I think that this is a very important step towards improving diagnosis of tuberculosis. Thank you for your attention.
Here, one, I think Sevim, you are next, then just bear with us if we cannot count everyone in the right order, but we try our best. Sevim, please.
Okay, I'll be really quick. Sevim Ahmedov, USAID, Washington, and I have a specific question to you, Dr. Panova. Very impressive results that you showed us with your experience of these molecular technologies that you're implementing in Russia. So my question is in terms of your plans, whether the technologies, do you have any plans for those, for the data that you are producing by the implementation? Whether do you have any plans for further review of the data by WHO, and if you have any plans for further endorsement by WHO of those technologies, like follow the same process that we have followed with Gene Expert, with Hein, and all of these other technologies that we have. Seeing what the cost is of what you have in Russia, of course, that really draws our attention, especially after Kathleen presented some of the additional costs now that we have to face with Gene Expert. So thank you.
Thank you for your question. The question is not an easy one for me personally. I mean, answering this question is not an easy task because the studies within the framework of the activities of the World Health Organizations are necessary. It is my opinion that this must be done. And such sets of reagents that are only used in a closed environment in the Russian Federation but generate great results. You know, if you take sensitivity, specificity, if you take the studies that took place in the Russian Federation, you know, they actually exceed the reagents that are currently recommended by the World Health Organization. Therefore, on my personal behalf and on behalf of the National Medical Scientific and Research Center of Infectious Diseases and Tuberculosis, as the head of the Laboratory of Clinical Microbiology, I am ready to cooperate. And quite naturally, all these studies, I'm ready to support them. Furthermore, I'd like to add a few words about our plans pertaining to the studies. This year, we are organizing a multi-center study on the territory of the Russian Federation. The Russian Federation is a huge territory. And the distance between Kaliningrad and Vladivostok is 9,000 kilometers. And the subjects of the Russian Federation, well, we have 8 federal constituencies. There's like several states in the Russian Federation, you see, and currently we have the following situation.
And this is in fact natural that every region or every subject of the Russian Federation has the right to select their own technology or technology of biochipping. We have more than 30 of subjects to select. When we have more than 200 labs, some labs cannot organize this proper infrastructure to use this technology, like the specific premises, the training. So they rather select gene expert. That's easier for them and useful for them. But our objective of National TB Center is to regulate the situation, to make sure that effective technology is used. And we are now running or starting a multi-purpose study where we would utilize involve larger TB institutions all over the Russian Federation, and we're currently conducting a number of meetings and with the heads of those laboratories. So we will invite them in March this year. We will conduct training, and then we will see how effective are these comprehensive studies in every subject of the Russian Federation, every region of the Russian Federation. And based on the data we will collect, we will see which technologies are better and more efficient for revealing Mycobacteria of TB. Like, for example, TB, gene expert technology seems to be very, especially ultra one, seem to be very sensitive. But some of our domestic users say that amplitude technology is even higher in some cases for liquid, culture than the previous one. So we and the National Center want to take it under control and see how things work. So to get this, collect data, which technologies are better effective in each case, for all the cases. Well, thank you.
Anna, thank you. I'm very excited about all of this. This is why we had wanted you to come here today, because I think these technologies that are being used in other countries need to be highlighted and be competitors to some of the standard WHO technologies. I also wanted to make a comment for the NTMs. I think this non-TB mycobacteria is one of my passions. I think that it's something that we don't know enough about, and that the studies that need to be ongoing, not only in this region of the world, but all in Africa, we have very little information. In other parts of Asia, we have very little information. And I think if we can inspire studies on looking more into the non-TB mycobacteria, we may be understanding if we're misdiagnosing or if we have co-infections and some of the issues that we're facing with our diagnostics as well.
Just also to briefly comment from the World Health Organization, we very much welcome, of course, all the producing of evidence and the exchange of information, and also if there's further research and validation. So we are very much in support, of course, of all of this, and highly welcome any such novelties that may then be also expanded and replicated elsewhere. There were further questions here on this side of the room, I think. Yes, please.
Good day, dear colleagues. Gulmira Kolmambetova, head of National Reference Laboratory of the Kyrgyz Republic. I have a question, actually the similar one that have been already asked by Mr. Osman Mahmed. Will these data revealed and presented in Anna Panova presentation be verified and approved by WHO? That was my question. But since answer was almost given, but a little comment on my side, if you allow me. Now, when countries, the country, and our country as well, moving from global fund support funding to national budgets, and now on local market, we expect to see a variety of test systems presented. Based on a law on public procurement, we will need to procure and purchase, in most cases, the cheapest product out of those available with comparative quality. Maybe Russia will, if Russia will present cheaper diagnostic system compared to the other ones, we will have to buy that one, provided that it's approved. But if we would like to buy those, if they're working, but provided that they are approved by WHO.
So there's a lot of innovation, and we are hopeful all for, of course, that innovations will come and be validated, approved, and that, of course, also then it will yield further improvements when it comes to cost effectiveness. So that's a very good and valid point, obviously. Kathleen, you wanted to say something?
I do think that there are challenges. Like, for example, this diagnostic has been around, but the challenges are that we have global fund funding, and we have to procure from a certain global fund approved diagnostics. And so it kind of restricts the ability to be free in our choice when we have donor money, right? I think that's more what you're getting at. And that's a challenge, and I think that's a challenge that we will see. And I'm not really sure how we can address it, but we think we may need to actively try to make some changes for that.
Absolutely, that's the other side of the coin, obviously, the challenge side, right? And that how we would like it to be more flexible and to go faster, obviously. And that is good to have on our radar, on our mental radar. Yes, over to you.
Yeah, thanks very much for those good points about the cost. But I think cheap tests that are not effective are not cost effective. And I think there is, of course, an issue of global fund requirements. But I think what's more important is the WHO pre-qualification system, which exists very nicely for drugs, although it's very heavy. And I know for diagnostic tests, this is a big challenge. And I think having quality, reproducible tests at good price is a challenge not only in TB. It's been a challenge in HIV, it's been a challenge in malaria, in other drugs, in other diseases, sorry. But I think we can never put price before quality. And I would say that I really hope to see more publications on these tests, more WHO approvals of tests, such that we can compare good quality tests with good quality tests, and then check on the cost effectiveness, because cheap tests are not very cheap if they don't work. Thank you.
No, of course. I'm glad you made that intervention. Obviously, quality is the most important characteristic, and then, I mean, costs are one element, but obviously subsidiary to the quality. That's the first thing. And also with regards to qualification or pre-qualification, indeed, we are very keen also on further supporting this. So that is why we encourage very strongly from WHO side that data and evidence be generated and shared, so then we can also move forward with that. And as you know, one of the 3 pillars of the current global NTB strategy, and also of the equivalent regional TB action plan that covers the period 2015 to 2020, is actually research, which is also encapsulated by one of our key, let's say, flagship initiatives at the regional office, the European Research Initiative on TB. So we are very strongly in favor of that and supporting also that. Well, speaking of indicators, I hope that you have been enjoying the session, or we hope that. when I say speaking of indicators, probably the least important, but still we are finishing also on time, the session according to the program. We hope you've been enjoying the session, and also there is more time and there's certainly more need to discuss further, but I am convinced that all the panelists and presenters are still here today and tomorrow, so please feel free to address them and continue the discussions. Maybe my co-chair would also like to say a few words of, if you would like to. Otherwise, welcome to lunch. Thank you very much from my side, and see you back here soon.
Yeah.
Yes, thank you. Among all, I would like to congratulate all speakers with very interesting presentations. A little comment, how much GeneXpert RTG costs in Russia? If I go buy a cartridge, GeneXpert in Russia, how much do I pay? One cartridge is about 3,000 rubles, which is roughly $60. Well, this makes Russia think about alternative sources for TB diagnostics. Then, well, in this case, this is one of our, our incentives to look for cheaper. Well, thank you. Well, да, всем спасибо.